All right, stand by for a quick intro, if I can find it. Welcome back to another episode of the Strongman Winner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Canby, and this is episode 69. Nice. With Shane Flowers of England. Shane has competed in numerous international shows, having great results at Europe's Strongest Man, Britain's Strongest Man, was the winner of SCL England last year, and has big sights for himself in the Euro 2025. So let's sit down with Shane. How's that bicep recovering? What do you think about the current strongman scene? And what can we learn from Shane Flowers on today's episode of the Strongman Winner Circle podcast? So tune in to hear all about Mr. Shane Flowers from the Strongman Winner Circle podcast today on this podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, notification bell to the channel so you know when all the podcasts are coming out. So here comes Shane Flowers. Sorry, Shane, I couldn't help myself. I know I mentioned a couple times that could be episode 69.
I love it, mate. That was cool. You made me look really good.
Oh, yeah? Well, I do my best. But, yeah, welcome to the show. I, of course, appreciate having you come on. Of course, you've been very helpful, especially leading up to Giants Live, giving me the nicks and tricks and stuff like that. So it's great to kind of connect. It's a shame that I'm going to have to wait maybe potential whole next year to see you in person. But, of course, podcast is the next best thing, right?
Yeah, man. Good point. We've only actually met that one time, haven't we? It was only at Europe's this year, was it?
Yeah, yeah. We've been chatting, but yeah, I think it was that one. Yeah, that first at Europe's was our first time, but hopefully that's first of many.
Yeah, first of many.
And oh my God, and questions already coming in, but we'll get into Shane's bicep and we'll talk about kind of his competitions coming through. But I wanted to kind of start with kind of a little bit of origins. But Shane, you originally were a powerlifter to start your strength career. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the first powerlifting competition was January 2015. So coming up 9 years ago now. And I was never really that much of a powerlifter, to be honest with you. I'm not built to powerlift. I'm very sort of long-legged. So when you get me on a squat or when you get me on a bench with my long arms, I never really boded well to those events. Deadlift was one that I sort of naturally gravitated to. Did powerlifting. I was in drugs tested federations for the majority. I was in the IPF. I competed in the Commonwealth and things like that, and had reasonable success. I only sort of competed in the junior categories because I was under 23 years old. And just through a series of different things, injuries, stuff like that, I just fell out of love with the training really of powerlifting. It just sort of got really boring after a while. And people was always telling me that I would make a better strongman anyway. So I just turned my hand to that instead.
No, excellent. But you do have a powerlifting background, so you can at least kind of dictate to this, because I don't know if you were watching the Shaw Classic over the weekend, but there was a lot of strict judging coming from some guys like powerlifters, like even of course, the famous, why am I blanking right when Ed Cohn? Yes, he waved off at, like, for instance, like Singleton's deadlift, which I think the explanation was that his grip got loose. But what were your thoughts on some of even the squat and the deadlift events?
If we will start with Evan's deadlift, I think it was a good lift. That was a successful deadlift. But with that in mind, obviously, if the athletes have been briefed beforehand that the rule states thumb has to stay in contact, if he broke that rule, he doesn't get that lift. But any strong man watching that, or anyone, I think even powerlifters watching that, will say it's a good lift. It's just a very, very strict call, but you have to accept that. If that's what the rule says, that's what the rule says. And then the same with Thor's dumbbell. Again, like that was, he locked that out. That was a good dumbbell, and you're talking fractions of a second before he would have got the down call. But again, if they were briefed beforehand, which I think they were, then fair's fair. So The only thing out of the Shore Classic that really kind of stands out to me was the squat event. Obviously, it's always tricky trying to do a squat in a strongman competition anyway, because you've got varying heights of lifters. They're not squatting traditionally like a power lifter would, where there's no sort of, it's not like a pin squat. It's not on a machine or, you know, whatever they did at the Shore Classic. That was sort of like a Smith machine, wasn't it? But I could just, when I was watching it, it was noticeable that there was a couple of athletes that had higher squats than others. And that's just, obviously Brian does a pretty good job at trying to manage these things, but I think there was an error there somehow. And I've got a theory on it as well, actually, if you want to hear it. I think
absolutely. But first, we'll take a listener question. Of course, Robo Pissatron asks, do you think the strict rules will help better standardized competitions and add more legitimacy to the lifts?
Yes.
What do you think, Shane?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Especially if we're talking records. If someone was to break a record and it was a sloppy lift, not maybe locked out or not in control before he got the down signal or anything like that, we're constantly now on the precipice of records being broken at pretty much every show. So I think the standard of refereeing needs to be in line with that, because if there's sloppy refereeing, then if I had the record and someone took it and it was a sloppy lift, I'd be fuming. So I want to see the standard elevated. And maybe I think there's probably a Goldilocks between what Shore's currently doing and what other federations are doing in terms of the strictness of refereeing. I think Brian's probably done an overcorrection and gone a little bit too strict. He probably needs to just bring it back a touch.
I agree with that. He's usually pretty tight because he's already now allowing figure eights, so allowing only figure 9 straps in his competitions. And you want to see the biggest and best weights pulled. So I think you got to find a level, but you know, just like Brian in any other competition, hopefully comes back, sees where he fell short and come back and is that much better. But I did want to comment on Thor's lockout. They say like the dumbbell moved after he pressed it, but I felt like it moved in his hand. I saw a couple of the front clips. I saw more of the a post that Terry ended up posting on Facebook.
Yeah, that's the only.
It was on the side, and you can kind of see the dumbbell moving. But with that with that much money on the line, it's tough. It's really a tough one.
It is. That lift particularly was right on the line of was it good or not, whereas some other lifts are obviously over that or under that. I do think Terry made the right call. It's a very strict call, but that's what it is. I'd rather see too strict than too slack, to be honest.
All right. What do you think? Do you aspire to go to the Shaw Classic one day after we've seen the last 4 or 5 years from the Shaw camp?
I did. I dropped Brian a little cheeky DM earlier this year when I was actually feeling really good, and I just said to him, you know, what's the sort of prerequisite? What do I need? And he said, a good performance at Europe's, good performance at Worlds, and that was it. And then obviously that went tits up. So it's definitely on my sort of. That's what I want to be. I want to be one of those athletes that's representing England at the Shaw Classic, at the Rogue, at the Arnold's. Maybe it can be done as within a year, possibly, but I'm probably realistically looking at a couple of years to really get to that level, I think.
Sure. But it looks like a pretty, out of the 8 events, they're pretty heavy. I thought in the past, Brian's had events that are just kind of heavy just to be heavy. So it will be interesting kind of how it will mold itself in the years to come. Because again, you still want to have the guys be competitive, but you don't want any zeros like what we saw on the squat. I know we saw some zeros on the stones, and there's some kind of tacky issues. But I think that happens from time to time. But again, there's something that will be interesting in terms of how everything will mold going forward. But less about Brian, more about Shane. How's the bicep feeling? How many weeks out are we currently? And for our listeners, both Shane and I are recovering from bicep surgery, so we're gonna talk a little bit about our recovery.
What are you now? Because I'm 4 weeks ahead of you.
I'm 13. So are you 17 weeks?
Yeah. That's 17 or 18 weeks now. It's
You
doing
know,
really
you know
well.
what's interesting? Technically, I technically tore my bicep before you because it happened initially at Europe's on the mixed grip in the deadlift bars. So, but I didn't. We weren't really aware. And 2 days before Worlds is when I got the MRI results that I was torn. But I kind of said YOLO and had to go. Right.
Yeah, I remember it. I remember we were backstage at Europe's. We were next to each other in the bit where we keep our kit. And I remember I didn't know what event you did it on, but I remember you were in quite a bit of discomfort with your forearm. I thought it was your sort of forearm here. I didn't realize it was your bicep tendon.
I thought too, but in the end, especially after Worlds where I tore the bicep a little more, I had a full tear in the forearm, but didn't detach, and then I had the 3 centimeter distal bicep tendon.
So you made a bit of mess. Made a bit of a mess of your arm.
But again, yeah, it's all right. But yeah, but tell us a little bit about your recovery. So 17 weeks in, how are we feeling? What are we thinking?
Yeah, so it's gone really well. It's gone as good as you could expect it to go. Obviously, a pretty devastating injury to happen to anyone, but it was more for me. The real kick in the dick was the timing of it being 10 days before I was scheduled to go to World's Strongest Man. But when it happened, I literally jumped straight into action. I got onto the best surgeon that I could possibly find, the same guy that's fixed Adam Bishop, Evan Singleton, all those guys. Got straight on with him. 5 days post rupture, I had my surgery. It was very successful, and then I literally just left no stone unturned with my rehab, and I went absolutely balls out with it. And it's been a relatively, touch wood, a relatively smooth journey. It's just exponentially got better and better week on week. So at the moment now, I'm back doing events, pretty much every event. I've touched At the Stones, Conan's Wheels, Farmers, you name it, I've done it. But obviously the load is still quite a bit down at the moment. I'm still only lifting 80 kilo sandbags, 100 kilo stones, stuff like that.
Okay, all right. So you haven't gone too heavy on the sandbags and stones. Now, deadlift wise, what are you back up to?
Do you know what? My bicep doesn't hurt at all when I'm deadlifting. If my coach allowed me, I'd probably have a good go at a 1 rep max now, and I'd be fine. We're still in a kind of like an off-season phase though, where he's keeping me beltless, stiff bar, pause work, all that stuff to kind of keep me restrained and keep the numbers down. But yeah, I could probably deadlift whatever I wanted right now. The bicep would be fine.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine you're probably itching for a big lift, just even in the training room, probably after a long day on the farm.
A little bit. I'm weak as a kitten at the moment. My body weight's about 10 to 15 kilos down compared to where I'm usually at when I compete. And you'll know as well, when you come back from surgery, the first time I actually lifted weight again, I was so weak, just across the board and everything. I don't know why. It was just, I think your nervous system down regulates, everything comes down a level. And I'm itching to get back to competing, but when I compete, I want to be back at my best. I don't want to come in half-assed.
Yeah, absolutely. They say like the 6-month mark is like a good mark after 6 months after surgery is where, with some training and some rehabilitation, you should be back to kind of normal. But I feel like someone might need maybe 8 months, 10 months to potentially get to a new peak if they're not looking to compete right at the 6 months mark.
Yeah.
So this is a good question that Mr. Robo Pissatron, is this a friend of yours? He's asking a lot of questions. How are you guys going to get over the mental block of trusting your biceps on a big lift? I'm slowly getting there. I only increase maybe 5 or 10 pounds per lift, but you're back to like a 130 log and of course heavier deadlifts. But how's that mental block working out for you, or even like touching stones?
Yeah, I mean, when I first did an Atlas stone, or when I first cleaned a log, it was nervous. But you just take each day as it comes. And it's not like I've gone from doing 0 to trying to clean 130, 140 kilos. So, just a day at a time, really. And then you just got to trust the fact that it's attached, and you got to trust the rehab process. And obviously, I'll be nervous. Like the first time I do an Atlas stone run, the first time I do heavy sandbags, there's going to be those nerves there, but I'll quickly get over it. Just one day at a time.
Sure. It gives me a lot of encouragement when I see, like I had Tristan Hoth on a couple episodes ago, and Tristan tore his bicep in 2022. And then he had, of course, the great run towards the end of 2023, where you compete against him at the Magnus for Magnuson Classic. And then, of course, he's had the great run so far in 2024. Evan Singleton, as of course, sometimes ruthless and as crazy as he lifts, he tore both of his biceps, and they look like they're both holding on pretty well. So I've just so many good examples of guys that have tore the biceps and come back stronger and better, and have or been on that pro scene where we want to be. So it does give us, I think, a lot of hope. So, but again, we still have to put in the work going forward. Now, do you meet with your surgeon at all again before like any more meetings with the surgeon, or are you clear with him yet?
Yeah, I'm all cleared with him. I had one follow-up, which was 4 weeks post-surgery. That was in person. And then other than that, I've Skyped him a couple of times, but he's about 8 hours away from me in the car. So he's a long way away.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's signed me off. I'm all cleared and good to go now. And then pretty much my bicep is in Coach Shane's hands now. He's pretty much navigating my training and my sort of reloading. So far, so good. He's obviously coached a couple of guys that have torn biceps, Luke Richardson and whoever else. So I'm in good hands, I feel like.
All right, excellent. Well, it'll be interesting in terms of kind of what's in store for you guys going forward. But again, we just have to follow the channel, watch the Instagram to see kind of the lifts and progress and all. Now, speaking of competing, so of course I saw that you had to drop out of the SCL show, feeling that you probably weren't going to be as ready as you wanted to be. But any other kind of competitions on the horizon?
So when I got injured initially, I spoke to Darren, I spoke to Colin, and Darren basically said to me that the door's open for any time, for any show that I want when I come back, which is nice. But with that being said, the only show that's really applicable to me this year for Giants Live is Glasgow, because you got the one in 2 weeks' time, which is too soon for me. Then you've got Vegas, which they're not going to invite me to Vegas. And then the only one left on the calendar for this year is Glasgow. And subject to what the events are, that I might do that. But realistically, I'm looking at doing one show this year, and that would probably be the Magnus Classic, which is at the back end of November. I did it last year, and it was by far my favorite show that I've ever done, by far. So I feel like if I've literally spent the last 4 months being robbed of my bicep, and then I've also got a knee issue as well. So I want to make sure that when I come back and do my first prep for a competition again, I want to really enjoy it and have a competition in mind that's really exciting to me. So
absolutely. Well, the Magnus for Magnuson, it just 9 events, 3 days, tour around Iceland. It's and just the camaraderie with the fellows. It sounds like a great time. I was actually bummed that I wasn't able to complete last year because I got an invite through winning the Arnold Europe in Spain, but unfortunately I had a wedding, so I had to skip out on that. But I guess that would probably worked out in best, because I ended up making the OSG final, and that helped me to get into Europe's. So I guess things kind of worked out for a reason. But originally I was going to do 2 different Magnuson for Magnuson shows this year. I was going to do one in June, which is his 3-day summer show, but unfortunately the bicep, and then we weren't sure right after after Worlds if it was just the forearm or bicep. Ended up being, of course, the bicep, so I wasn't going to do the Gimli, the one that's in like northern Canada, either. So but I think it's interesting because I like it's getting the Magnus for Magnuson is getting some good like mainstream coverage, but I feel like it's like a it's like a milestone or a kind of a bucket list contest for many athletes.
For sure. It's such a cool competition. I mean, getting to do the actual Husafell all those sorts of events, they're just so cool. And then it is brutal. Don't get me wrong, you're stood out in the wilderness of Iceland in winter, -5, 10 degrees, whatever it is. You don't warm up. You can't warm up. You're straight out of a minibus and you're literally picking up that stone and running it for as far as you can. But I feel like it's a good event. It's a good competition. It's also, for me, my main focus is coming into 2025 full steam, guns blazing. And in order for me to do that, I feel like I need to do one show post bicep tear to knock the rust off. And I feel like the Magnus is a good test for that.
Absolutely. How does, now while we're on the topic, especially for cold weather contests, how does one train around training in the cold and getting into an atmosphere like that? And because even at that time, was there any daylight? Was because it's far up north, it's November, so is the sun peeking out?
I think it gets light at around 10 o'clock in the morning. When I say light, I don't mean like broad daylight. It's just very gloomy all day. I can't really remember how I trained for it. It's quite cold where I'm at, actually, to be honest. When I train in my garages and my barn, the UK winter is pretty cold as well. So I guess I'm quite lucky with that. But it's actually a good point because Tristan obviously won the competition. And I was speaking to him, and I don't know where he's from in Canada, but I think where he is from, it's very cold.
Edmonton. So he's on the west coast, like above California, in Canada.
Is it cold there?
Well, it's still pretty cold. Yeah, Edmonton's pretty cold because it's anything above Oregon and Washington State are pretty cold.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, because he is a police officer, if I'm not mistaken. So he said he's often just out on the streets all day in the blistering cold. It's quite obvious, I think, when you go to that competition, who's acclimatized to the temperatures and who's not. And luckily, I think I was okay.
Robo Pistoltron mentioned Rongo had his shirt off every event. So yeah, how does an Australian that's used to nice warm weather come into a show like that? Maybe he's just crazy enough that he's able to.
Yeah. Rongo, not only is he crazy enough, he'll take his t-shirt off and he'll do the events with a bare chest. He's crazy. Rongo is just not wired upright, or maybe he is wired upright. I'm not sure. That was an experience. Competing alongside Rongo, he's awesome. And for anyone that wants to understand what my experience was like at the Magnus, we were in a minibus touring Iceland for 3 days, and I was stuck between Rongo on one side and Paro Dwyer on the other for 3 days with them, just like that. It was crazy.
Rongo's someone I would like to meet. I know he was having a tough time getting an invite to Worlds just because right now he looks like he's like the third Australian/New Zealand behind Matt Ragg and Eddie Williams. So it's really hard to squeeze in potentially a third individual from that region. But I hope to, of course, get the chance to compete against him. Of course, he has a great press and just a great all-around athlete. But talking about different scenes, so the English and the UK scene looks like it's getting pretty spicy. Of course, I made some notes. So, of course, you have yourself and someone like Adam Bishop on the mend right now. After the deadlift show, Hicksy's probably going to return to full competitions. You have like someone like Luke Richardson back in action. You have youngsters like Patty Haynes, Flynn, Glasscock, all doing really well. Glasscock taking second behind Roman, the Ukrainian, this past weekend. And then you have, of course, Paul Smith and you have Bilton lingering in there, as well as, of course, the two Scottish guys. So what do you predict for the British scene in like the UK scene, English scene to come in the years following?
I mentioned Kane Francis as well because he'll be really sour that you missed him.
Oh, Kane! I even wrote Kane. I even wrote Kane, but I'm sorry, Kane. Don't hurt me.
He's the fish from Wish. That's what it is. You just got that confused.
Oh, that's great.
The scene's unbelievable. I mean, given the names that you just listed, I could probably add another 10, 15 guys to that list that are they're knocking on the door of England's strongest man, Britain's strongest man competition. So keeps you hot on your toes, so to speak. If you look at the landscape at the moment, obviously you do have Adam Bishop, that when he's on form, he's the top Englishman. There's no denying that. And then you've obviously got Graham Hicks. I think Luke Richardson, when he's on top form, he's top 3, top 5 at World's Strongest Man. So there's seriously dangerous talent in the UK at the moment. And it's fun to be a part of, obviously. But for me I think we're lucky as Brits, the fact that we get more opportunities at Giants Live to then qualify for World's Strongest Man. But equally, for me to stand out as one of the best Englishmen, I have to beat 8 or 10 other really good guys. Whereas if I come from a country that was less represented, it'd be a lot easier. So I think we've got it better, but we've also got it harder at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned there's probably 8 or 10 guys. Any other guys you want to shout out that are that the fans, the viewers should be looking out for?
Yeah, there's a couple. I watched the qualifier for England's Strongest Man, and there's guys on there. One of them, his name is Zach Hill. He's 21 years old. He can log press 180 kilos. He's deadlifting 400 kilos. He got quite unlucky with the qualifier, but otherwise we would have seen him compete at England's. And I think give him just another couple of opportunities, he'll be there. So Zach Hill, obviously Ben Glasscock's coming through really fast now. I think he's one to watch. Andrew Flynn, likewise. My brother, he'll be sour if I don't mention my brother.
Is he older brother? Is he older brother?
Yeah. He's 3 years older than me.
Okay, all right. But but it looks like he's getting some opportunities getting into the SEL circuit, and of course, I think he got his shot at England's Strongest Man. I don't think he had the performance he was looking for.
No, he's just.
But
he's got.
Has he been competing as long as you, or?
He's been competing in strongman longer than me, and he was a power lifter before that. But although he's my brother, he's very sort of different to me in certain respects. Firstly, his body type is completely different. I'm 6'4". Mitch is 6'1", but he still outweighs me by, I think, 15, 20 kilos. He's on the larger side. It's gone to his detriment previously, where he's come into competitions too statically focused, too heavy, and he'll win the deadlift by 3-4 reps. But then when it comes to moving, he'll come last on a loading medley. So he's just got that balance between static and dynamic wrong at the moment. But he's decided to take the rest of the year out, and his training phase at the moment is looking really interesting. He's losing weight. He's getting faster. He's doing some Olympic lifting to try and gain a bit more sort of athleticism. So he's doing all the right things. He just needs a bit more time and a bit more confidence as well.
All right. Are you coaching him?
No, he's coached as well by Shane from MST.
Okay, all right, pretty cool. So he has, of course, both brothers under his belt. But it looks like, of course, you run a little coaching business. You mentioned, or we were mentioning one of your athletes, Mr. Glasscock. I had of course, the pleasure of competing with him at the Arnold Europe, which was an interesting contest, a very kind of fast contest. But of course, I was delighted to see that he was up there on like some of the static lifts. I think that his deadlift has come up enormously. But what do you kind of, as a coach, what do you really kind of focus on, or what do you kind of preach to your athletes?
I get quite a lot of guys coming up to me that have this sort of warped mentality on what it takes to be a strong man, and I think they've taken inspiration from the likes of Eddie Hall circa 2014, where they need to be as big and as heavy and eat as much food as they possibly can. And I tell my guys that that's not what I want them to do. I want them to not think of themselves just as a strong man, but if you think of yourself as an athlete instead, it's just take that small change in the terminology can change the perception. And instead of eating all these dirty foods and not doing any cardio and not looking after themselves, by trying to be an athlete, they're taking care of all the things that's required. So I take, like, for example, I've got a guy now, he's been on board with me for 3 weeks, and already his health has improved dramatically, his conditioning dramatically. He's eating a lot better. And the actual work that I'm doing on his training program, not a lot. It's very simple stuff, but it's the other stuff outside of that where I'm sort of not just sort of holding his hand through the process, but trying to educate him on all the nutrition, cardio, and people don't even track their blood pressure or anything like that. So trying to create athletes, not just strongmen, is probably what I start preaching.
Ooh, I do like that. It's a little more kind of rounded out. But it's tough though, because you go out there and you see that guys get noticed for having a big log, for having a big deadlift, so they put a lot of time and effort into that. So is that piece where you want to be around a good rounded athlete, and that's going to be the best recipe to win shows. But what gets noticed is the static lift. So it's even a tough thing that even us pros have to deal with, just because of how much we have to prioritize different lifts and different items. Because at the end of the day, sometimes the difference between keep competing in the sport and not is getting those opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're right.
So what are you do? But speaking of big deadlifts and a big press, so of course I see I've been a fan of seeing you have a great strict press, great deadlifts, even stone loading. You won the stones out in Europe's, but I hear you're known for your throwing. What kind of tips and tricks do you have for shitty throwers like myself?
I don't have it. What I will say, and this is probably not going to be any help whatsoever, is that the very first time that I ever trained throwing, I was just naturally very good at it. And I think it was Mitch Hooper that said, you don't really want to be taking advice from someone that's naturally good at an event. If I started off bad and then made myself good, then I would have a lot more knowledge to be able to sort of pass on to you. But honestly, my technique's not really changed. Maybe it has adapted a little bit, but not consciously. I've just sort of done whatever my body wants to do, and I just throw it. I don't think about anything more than that. I just pick the bag up and throw it and try and be as fast as I can. So I'm sorry if that's no use to you, but
well, no. Well, there's different ways to dissect it. So do you think it's some of the different training that you do outside of throwing that would contribute towards throwing? So for instance, I had Wes Stravinsky on. Of course, he tied for the keg throw record at Worlds, and he's had other performances like OSG, where I think he won the throwing event at OSG. He talks about even like equating similar to kind of to American football lifters, where they kind of it's almost like you have a bent at the hips and knees, and you're pretty much just extending upwards. There's other guys that take a little more of a Highland approach. There's different individuals that are big into kind of hang snatches and snatches as a good metric in terms of carryover. But do you feel like that, again, like something like a snatch or other accessories would be complementary towards your throwing and your lifting?
Yeah, I would say if you're someone that needs to work on that sort of explosive, I mean, the best way to train throwing is to throw, right? I mean, you can't get any more specific than that. But if you're looking for sort of accessories or other variations or different lifts that you can do to bring your throwing game up, then I would be looking at things personally, maybe like a snatch or something like that, something that requires a lot of explosive power. And for me, I would always say as well, throwing, for me particularly, the only part that it actually drains me is from the knee down. If I do a lot of throwing in a session, my calves, my feet really hurt after a while. I don't feel it anywhere in my posterior chain, not my arms, not my shoulders. It's just my calves, they just wear out. So I think obviously having some fast twitch fibers in your lower leg make a massive difference, and just bringing that up if you can will help. But I'll tell you what I do when I do train throwing, when it's coming up in a competition, I hit it with quite a lot of frequency. I would throw maybe upwards of 4 or 5 times a week. And then what I would also do is purposefully never fail a throw. So if that means I have to train lighter or throw lower over a lower beam, if I don't ever fail in training, then you almost you don't want to learn how to fail. You don't want, because throwing is such a high confidence event. If you're going into a throwing event in a competition and you've never missed a throw, you've never missed a bag, you've not even in training or in competition, then you don't know how to fail. So whereas if you go into throwing in a competition and your last couple of training sessions you were throwing under or you were hitting the bar, your confidence is gone.
Yeah, I've been in that situation a few times. Just not something that hasn't come natural, but I think the biggest thing is I think in the past, just in the time now, I'm a little bit more in the suburbs, but in the time I was in the city, kind of city living, so it was really hard to get the frequency of throwing in. So I think if just by the pure factor of frequency, throwing with frequency, I think that's gonna kind of improve it. But I wasn't a great thrower at 105, so heavyweight. So I'm just hoping that there's not going to be too many throwing events in my future. But that's something that is part of the sport. So I do gotta figure that out one point or the other. But talking about big deadlifts. Are you expecting anybody to break the record come September 28th in Vegas?
Yeah, I do think if Hicksy's training is well put together, I think he's the guy to do it. But I'm sorry, Hicksy, if you're watching this, I think he might run the risk of peaking too soon. The Deadlift Championships is 5 weeks away. Correct me if I'm wrong. 5 weeks, 4 weeks.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
And he's been hitting low to mid 400s. I think I saw a 450 deadlift 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think he has the physical attributes required. And I feel like if he can put it together during his training and competition without getting injured, I think he's the best candidate for it. But I do think he's running the risk of peaking too soon. I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope I'm wrong. So I'm sorry, Hicksy, if you're watching this, mate. But yeah, I think Hicksy's the top boy to do it. And then my second guy, honestly, would probably be Matt Ragg or Mitch Hooper. Initially, I was a very firm believer in Matt Ragg doing it, but again, Matt, I'm sorry if you're watching this, mate. I expected bigger numbers from him at the Royal Albert Hall, and also expected a bigger number from him at the Shore Classic just gone. And I think Mitch is actually on par at the moment, maybe ahead of Matt out of a suit. So let alone when he goes into a suit, I think they're both high 400 kilo deadlifters for sure.
Interesting. It should be interesting the way it play out. But on Hicksy, I had him on the podcast right after the last deadlift championships, and he talked about back then saying he was going to take Britain's off. He was going to take if he even got the opportunity to go Worlds, he would pass it up just to focus on this one record. So I think it does mean a lot to him. So I think it's going to be it'll be pretty interesting. I think Rag did try to go for like something like 456 or like 1,000-pound pull at the Shaw and just came up short. So I would, but I could see if he hit that raw, that would give you a lot of confidence going into 5 weeks from now.
Yeah.
But personally, I'm gonna be in attendance watching the show. I'm heading down to Vegas, bringing the missus. So I'm pretty excited to watch some big strongmen under the bright light. So that should be pretty interesting. And actually, one guy we forgot was I guess Ivan Markov is going to go after for the 6th time. So that'll be interesting. Maybe the 6th time is a charm because I think he's done 3 through Giants Live. He's done like 2 on his own. So I think this might be his 5th or 6th time going after it, which is pretty wild.
It's pretty crazy. I think his training looks really good, but his training has always looked really good. I wish any company out there listening would send him some calibrated plates and an actual deadlift bar, or the deadlift bar that they'll use in the competition. I'd like to see him train it a lot more specific. And I know he does he's deadlifting off mats, right? He's doing like an elevated deadlift, which obviously he's a better deadlifter than me, so I'm assuming it's working. But I'd love to see Makarov train it specifically without all these different weird plates and stuff like that, because it can throw a lift off, I think.
Sure. But both Ivan and Hicksy, they're about like 140 kilos, like 150 kilos at most. I think when Eddie and Thor both went over 500 kilos, they were both like close to 200 kilos in body weight, or 440. So I feel like, is that what it, maybe that's what it takes to potentially get into those, get it close to 1,100 pounds or 500 kilos, right?
I would say that it helps, and especially if you're breaking new ground like Eddie or Thor was, then it's definitely a good thing to have in the locker. But you think of like the amount of guys now deadlifting 1,000 pounds, and they weigh say 140, 150 kilos. If you just continue scaling that up, I think, how many guys do we know that are deadlifting 400 kilo that weigh just over 100 kilos? So if you keep scaling it up, I think it probably bodes well to be quite heavy. But after a certain point, if you're too big, you're just not going to get in those positions required. So who knows?
Ooh, sure. Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, we're good. Hope for the best. I think that I think Hicksy has I think no one's ever taken as much time off as Hicksy for like a true competitor. Take
Yeah.
as much time as Hicksy has to go after this one record. So we're really looking forward to him doing the big record. So talking about actually, we've been pretty positive. So let's switch things up a little bit, Shane.
Oh,
So
here we go.
the world of strongman, the world of lifting, the world of gym lifting. Is there anything that grinds your gears? Is there anything that just gets the hairs on your neck just up in arms when you're looking at the internet? Just these youngsters, if they have too much, if they're pulling maybe only 100 kilos, but they're wearing a full SBD gear and Leco
Um,
bar with calibrated plates, or having their tripods. But I've had many different things that have grind my gears. But what grinds Shane's gears in the world of strongman and in the world of lifting?
all of the above, exactly what you just mentioned. But one thing in particular that gets me, and I won't mention any names, but people that put out massive claims that they're going to win X title or do X lift that don't have, in my opinion, the evidence to back up that claim. It's that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I know like manifesting things and putting it out there into the universe is a good thing for some people and stuff. But when you're talking about becoming the world's strongest man, when you've never even made the final, or talking about deadlifting 500 kilos, but yet you can't even, you're nowhere near 1,000 pounds yet. I think we'll use the world's strongest man for an example. If you, in my head, you have the right to say that you're going to win world's strongest man title when you've probably become a finalist, maybe when you're even top 5. Then when you make that claim, it's like, okay, you've got this evidence to support it. But otherwise, if you're just spouting shit and emptily manifesting stuff, that really pisses me off after a while.
Sure. So there's a fine line, because that's a good practice to do, like telling yourself, I'm going to be world's strongest man one day, maybe writing out your goals. But you think just the
Yeah.
act of putting those goals out on the internet, just adding another factor where it's,
I think more so, like if that's your long-term goal, then absolutely fine. More credit to you, but you need to dissect that into smaller, bite-sized chunks. And your first immediate goal in that scenario would be, okay, I'm going to be a world's strongest man finalist. Then you make that. Then, okay, I'm going to be top 5 next year. Then you go from there. It's just some people that have made claims beforehand have, in my opinion, no legitimacy in their claims, and it's almost painful to watch them sort of blindly follow their ambitions when they're just miles off what I think, in my opinion.
I think that's very fair. Only if you were a fly in the wall. When I was doing my world's strongest man interviews, I said, I want to be world's strongest man one day, but I have to be at the show 3 or 4 times in a row in order to potentially get there. And I have to make the finals first, and I have to at least get to have my first debut in order to get there. So I said that this was the first step into my journey. But I'm still keeping that. But I also think too, if your goal as a pro heavyweight or any strongman, your goal is not to be world's strongest man, then I don't know if you're in the right
Oh no,
sport, right?
yeah, of course. My long-term goal, or I'll call it a dream at this stage, but that would be my dream, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. My goal for this year, pre-bicep injury, was to make the final. That was it. All I wanted to do was make the final, and then I would have been happy finishing 10th. And then scale that up the following year. Okay, I want to look at maybe doing short classic or whatever like that, and then it would be top 5, top 3, blah blah blah. I like to just be realistic with my expectations. I feel like you're more likely to achieve it when it's broken down into those realistic bite-sized chunks.
Absolutely. So of course, kind of moving on. So I've been playing a fun game. It's similar to Marry, Free, Kill, but I call it Start, Bench, Cut. So if you had like a Strongman contest and you had 3 guys and you had to start one, bench one, or cut one, between Evans Nana, Shane Flowers, and Mitch Flowers and Kevin, and Mr. Francis, who would you start, bench, or cut? So you have Nana, Francis, and Mitch Flowers. So your 3 boys.
Oh God, why are you doing this to me? I will start Kane because he is the best out of those 3. Yeah, at the moment. I would bench Mitch. I'd bench Mitch. Yeah. So sorry, Evans.
And see you later, Mr. Nana.
Yeah.
He competes too much. He needs honesty. He's I was one thing that I love. One thing that he mentioned, and I think it's somewhat true. Maybe he counted some competitions as or like some competitions as training days, but supposedly he did 40 competitions last year, which is, if you're trying to get experience, that's the best way, especially in your early years. But I don't know how many of those competitions might have been glorified training days.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. He competes a lot. I mean, he competed at the World's Strongest Latino like 2 weeks ago. He's from Ghana and he lives in Belgium. I didn't even know he was Latino. And then the following weekend, he was.
So you get the. He was on the French flag.
Right. I don't think he's French. And then the following weekend,
I think it was.
He did the Dutch Championships the following week.
So he's getting some good. He's getting some good contests. Yeah.
He's getting around.
I know that. I think probably the French. Of course, the French representation might be a stretch, but he does have a Dutch passport in of course, is it Ethiopia? Is that where he's originally from? No, Ghana. Sorry, Ghana. A Ghanaian passport. So that I think when it comes to, I think it just, as I've learned from now having dual passports, I think that's the one kind of ticket is the passport in order to kind of represent and make it all right. And again, having birthrights or living rights, I think that's kind of, the gateway into it in order to kind of compete for a fellow country. But SCL does like to kind of probably stretch things. But you talked a little bit on it. So you talked about certain things that you want to get done. But I have the question I've had for most of my people on the show is like, when everything is said and done, what are you looking to accomplish in the world of strongman? So you mentioned about getting to the finals, potentially become world's strongest man, but is there any records that you would want to chase or anything that you wanted to achieve by the end of the day?
That's a good question. The only thing that really springs to my mind straight away is I want to be in the sport long enough and obviously compete at a decent level and do well when my son can come and watch me. So at the moment he's just turned 1. So he's not, if he comes to watch me now, he's not going to remember that. But if I'm in the sport long enough that he's coming to my competitions when he's 6, 7, 8 years old, hopefully by then I am a contender and I'm right up there. That's the only real goal that I have. So it's difficult to quantify it in terms of like, I want to gain this title or, I want to win that record or whatever it may be. It's just, I think I was asked this question before and I answered it. I would love the career that Terry Holland's had, basically, where you win titles. He's podiumed at Worlds, but he's been in the sport for a long time, and he's He's always considered one of the best in his country. I also want to travel more with World's Strongest Man. I want to go to, if you speak to Terry over the 10, 12, whatever it was years that he competed at Worlds, he's been all over the world. And at the moment, the years that I've been eligible to compete at World's Strongest Man, it's just been in America. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a whole topic you can look under, because historically at World's Strongest Man up to 2019, that's when they started the American contest in Bradenton, Florida for 2 years, and then Sacramento, and then Myrtle Beach now. And supposedly it's back in Sacramento next year, because they have a 3-year contract. So that's what the rumors are right now. But we are missing out on a lot of great locations. Like they have the Philippines and Malaysia, their time in sure. The times, what's it called? We're in Bosnia. Was it Bosnia? No, Botswana. There we go.
Yeah,
and they said that the different athletes I've talked to over there said that they would pretty much wake up in the morning and there would be lions and tigers and elephants outside their room. So we are, of course, maybe potentially getting robbed in the future, just because they do want a production. They do want actual fans to be around the World's Strongest Man site. So I think there's kind of hit or miss. So potentially maybe there'll be different outlets, like a Magnuson Classic type of contest that will be in other areas. Like I got invited to a contest in Singapore. I think it's for the Extinct Games. I don't know. I don't know if I saw some decent names on there. I think a couple of my friends in Jacob Finnery and Nadia Stowers are going down soon, but that looks pretty interesting. But we are coming up to close to 1 hour, Shane. So I want to open up to some questions for the people that are listening right now. My buddy Nico, the Greek Goliath, was asking about Shane's tips on bag throwing. Of course, we did cover that a little bit earlier. But do you have any specific tips on a particular bag? Like do you think controlling the whip is important, or the bat, or at least the what's it called, the backswing of throwing a bag?
Yeah, I'm personally not a big fan of, especially when people do these practice swings as well. They'll pick up the bag, they'll take a couple of steps back, then they'll look over their shoulder at what they're throwing it over, then they'll take a couple of practice swings. You've already wasted sort of 5 seconds there. So even if your actual throwing ability isn't fantastic, you can still put in a good time if you're quick and confident with the transitions, how you approach the bag. Even if you do have to take a first practice swing to get it over, as long as you're then straight onto the next one. I know it's pretty common to say that it's an easier said than done thing, but having the confidence to be able to go that fast is something that I think is a skill that can be learned through your training. So like I said previously, just don't learn how to miss. I know it sounds stupid or redundant, but if you don't know how to miss, you're going to miss less frequently. So.
Yeah, well, that's a great tip. I'm not sure if you guys have any more tips, but kind of throw them in the comments. But Shane, in terms of social media, of course, you're on Instagram, you got on YouTube. I'll have that in the description for all the individuals that listen to it after the live. But where else can people find you? Are you also on TikTok or Twitch or Discord or LinkedIn, Facebook?
No, I
MySpace?
have a TikTok. But I'm not active on there. Maybe I will be in the future. It's just Instagram, YouTube, and I have a Facebook page as well. So a dedicated athlete-only Facebook page, which is at shaneflowers.strongman.
Absolutely. And then if people were inquiring about your coaching and they want to work with Shane Flowers, what's the best way to contact you?
The best way would be email. So I have an email, shaneflowerscoaching@outlook.com. There's also, if you go onto my Instagram, there's the link in the bio where you can go and do the application form. Probably the worst way to apply is to just DM me, because I'm not good at replying to DMs. So email or follow the link in my bio.
All right, that works. So not too many questions came in through, but I think we did talk on a lot of topics. So I appreciate having you on, Shane. Thank you for taking the time. And then I end the show with one piece of advice for the viewers and all the listeners. So what's the last piece of advice you want to leave the listeners for today's episode of Shane Flowers, episode 69?
This is a quote from someone else. I don't know who, but if you're going through good times or bad times, just remember that this too shall pass.
And I like that. Of course, yeah, they don't. Things have time limits, but yeah, I love it. Shane, thank you. And for everybody that's listening, stay strong.